We have hopefully an exciting shir here. We're going to be dealing with the renowned Rabbi Hirsch Kalashir, who lived between 1795 and 1874. Now, Rabbi Hirsch Kalashir was a major Talmud Chacham. He was a student of the Nesivis. He was a student of Akiva Eger. He wrote a book, a Sefer on Choshen Mishpat. He was an expert in the philosophy of Kant and Spinoza. He was a friend with Moshe Mendelssohn over there. He wrote a book about philosophy. But his claim to fame is his book, Drishat LZion. Now, this book comprises of basically two parts. One part is he is analyzing how is the Gula Asida. We're all waiting for our redemption. How will it unfold? And he was of the opinion that it's not going to be one day we're going to wake up and some guy is driving a donkey and comes swoops down and says, I'm here, I'm Eliyahu, I'm Mashiach, and then all of a sudden a Beis HaMikdash is going to just come down from Shemayim. He was not a proponent of that shita. He felt that it would be a slow process. First, there will be a small amount of Yidden moving into Eretz Yisrael. Later on, there'll be a large group. Later on, we will build the Mizbeach. Later on, we will build the Beis HaMikdash. No Eliyahu, no Mashiach, no Navi. Subsequently, after all that, Mashiach will come, Eliyahu will come. But before all that happens, we have to do the first steps. The first steps are moving to Eretz Yisrael. The second step is building a Mizbeach, building a Beis HaMikdash without anything. Now, you have to understand what was going on when he was in his time. He was in the Enlightenment in the 1850s. It was the first time that Jews had some type of liberties, had some type of freedom. And it was the first time that there were extremely rich Jews. Extremely rich. Like Rothschild, Montefiore. And he felt this was the time to begin this process. Now, there were always Jews in Eretz Yisrael. Always. But a couple hundred. But they were all poor. Dirt poor. Indigent. And they were all learning. Doing nothing else. And they were being supported by the chalukah, by the stipend. Now, he had nothing against a group of Jews learning in Eretz Yisrael, but he felt that the way it should be done is that there should be a community in Eretz Yisrael who is not living on the dole. A community in Eretz Yisrael, an agricultural community who's able to support themselves. That'll be the first step of the Geula. Now, the second part of the shir, which will be extra credit, is I will go through some of his sources, where he knows that the way the Geula will develop will be through nature. Now, natural processes. Now, nowadays, he's wrote this in 1850. I think he'd be smiling. I think he's getting the laugh up there because he had a lot of opponents. But we see it's happening before our eyes. This is exactly what happened. In short, a group of Jews, us, are here, and the country is flourishing, and it's self-sustained. So at the end of the year, I will go through the riots that he brings, from the Yishalmi, from Gemorahs, from Midrashim, from Zohar. Many, many riots that this will be the process, a slow process. But the main part of the shir, which is contemporary halacha, is he claimed that in 2022, and then it was 1850, he said we could right now, this minute, go and bring a korban Pesach. We don't need Eliyahu, we don't need a Sanhedrin, we don't need Mashiach, we don't need Navi, we don't even need a Chaim Kanievsky. We could do it now. And is that right or wrong? Is that true? right now we could go. It doesn't sound right that now we can just bring a carbon. So why aren't we doing it? Well, that's what he was complaining about. Why aren't we doing it? And he put out the sefer, and all the great gedolim, he was very respected. He conversed with all the great gedolim, Rabbi Kiveger, the Erch Ner, the Malbim, the Ksav Kabbalah. They're all dealing with him back and forth. So I want to go through the highlights of that part of the sefer, of whether it's halachically possible in our days to bring a carbon Pesach. That'll be pretty exciting, right? Good. So, what are the impediments? Why wouldn't we be able to? Well, we'll get through all of this. Actually, later on in the shir, he challenged anyone to come up with reasons why you can't bring a carbon Pesach, and he got many letters, and he answered all the challenges. Okay, some better, some worse. He answered all the challenges. So let's go through some of the hurdles, see if we could agree, disagree. So anyone who didn't learn kachim, this is a little bit. You're going to learn a little bit of. You get a little bit of knowledge that you may not have had. First, biggest problem: the Temple Mount seemingly has no kedusha. It's analogous to New York City. What's the difference between the Temple Mount and New York City? Is there any kedusha anymore? Seemingly, after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, there is no more kedusha there. And if there's no more kedusha there, it's just like anywhere else in the world. Meaning, it's clear like day that you can only bring a carbon Pesach if there's kedusha's Beis Hamikdash. That's clear like day. And seemingly, it's not there anymore because the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So it's no different than New York City. And that's a given. I don't want to say why. I don't want to get into it. That's a given. If this is true, that there is no kedusha on the Temple Mount, like New York City, there's no way for us to imbue the kedushas there. There's no way enough to infuse the kedusha. That we would need a Navi, that we would need Eliyahu, that we would need a Sanhedrin. We can't do it now. Impossible. The only question is, maybe the kedusha that was infused in the Beis Hamikdash is still there. Maybe even though there was a destruction, maybe it's still there. Well, there are like 10 Gemaras in Shas that deal with this question. This exact question. And the one that we all know is the one in Megillah, because we all learn Megillah at one point in our life when things are going bad, so we open up a Megillah. So what does it say in the Megillah? This exact machlokes, exactly about this. And the question was, in our days, in 2022, could you build a bummer? Now, a little bit of a background. There are 3 types of altars that we could talk about. We could talk about the altar and the Beis Hamikdash. And on that altar, you could bring all karbanos. We could talk about bumais. Those are private entities, private altars that anyone could bring a carbon on in their backyard, no matter where that backyard may be. That is called a bama. And such a thing was quite prevalent at some time in history. You will be surprised to know there is goyim in our days are allowed to bring a carbon on a bama. And the Lubavitcher movement is trying to convince goyim to bring karbanos on bamas. They feel that that's important, which may be important. I'm not knocking them, God forbid. But that's another whole shir on itself, whether we should try to get the goyim to keep 7 mitzvah b'nei noach or not. But goyim are allowed to bring, in our days, anywhere in the world, a goy is allowed to bring a carbon on a bama. Now, what about the Jews? Could the Jews bring a carbon on a bama? That depends. If we say that there's no kedusha anymore on Har Bayis, so why not? There's no kedusha on Har Bayis. So the only time the Jews are not allowed to bring a carbon on a bama is if there is a sanctified special place. Then, I can't go through the psukim, but then you can't bring a bama. But if you tell me today the Temple Mount is like New York City, then No problem to bring a carbon anywhere in a bama. And this may sound weird, but that's exactly what the Gemara says. Amr Rabbi Yitzchak, that I heard that they bring kabbalas abamas in our days. No problem. Right? Okay. Meaning, when there's a Beit HaMikdash, you cannot bring a bama. But if there's no Beit HaMikdash and there's no kedushas Beit HaMikdash, you can bring. Now I don't want to get involved. There's an interim type of a beit called a bama gedoyla. If you want, you come to me afterwards. I'll explain to you what a bama gedoyla. Because we know that even when there was no Beit HaMikdash, there was a mishkan. There was mishkan shiloi. There was mishkan noiva givain. Over there, they had something called a bama gedoyla, which is something in between. Something between the mizbeach and the Beit HaMikdash, and something to be the bama. Good. But the Gemara says over there that Amr Bishua Shamati Shemakrivim Afa Pishain Bayis. He says, I heard that you bring a carbon in the Beit HaMikdash even though there's no bias. You could eat kachim even though there's no kloim, even though the walls are not there. And even though the walls are even though the walls of Yerushalayim are not extant, you could eat my chains there. Because he holds the kedusha rishona is everlasting. It doesn't make a difference that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. The kedusha is there forever. Now, according to Rabbi Yeshua, you cannot bring kabbanas on a bama, because even though the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, it's still considered the kedusha of Beit HaMikdash exists. Now, just to get a little bit of a background, there was the first Commonwealth and the second Commonwealth. There's kedusha shayna and kedusha shniya. There were two Beit HaMikdash. The first Beit HaMikdash, or the first Commonwealth, was Yeshua started it, and David built the first Beit HaMikdash. Then we know that's called kedusha rishayna. Then there's something called kedusha shniya. That was after the Babylonian exile. Ezra, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, they built the second Beit HaMikdash with the largest of Daryavesh, who was a Jew, and Koresh before him. That's called the second Commonwealth. So it says over here, Rabbi Shua says, not only from the second Commonwealth is the kedusha everlasting. He says, kedusha rishayna kitcha l'shaita v'kitcha l'aslavai. Even from the first Beit HaMikdash, even though it was destroyed, the kedusha remains forever. Okay? Wow. So like, whoa. So basically, there's kedusha Beit HaMikdash nowadays. And of course, we are all aware of that because we don't go up to the Har Bayis. Why don't we go up to the Har Bayis? If it was like New York City, you could go to New York City, I think. So why can't you go to Har Bayis? Clearly, it seems like we hold there's still kedusha of Beit HaMikdash and Har Bayis, right? But what do we paskin like? Who do we paskin like? It's not so clear here. Like I said, Rabbi Yitzchak said that no, you could bring a bama anywhere. You could, in our days, makar a bama. He holds there is no kedusha anymore on the Beit HaMikdash. So we open up a Rambam. That's what we do, especially when it comes to kachim issues, because there ain't no Shulchan Aruch and kachim issues. And what does the Rambam say? The Rambam says, he says, pay attention. He says that even though Ezra, anyone who learned Navi knows Ezra did a whole inauguration when he built the second Beit HaMikdash, he said there was a charade. It was not necessary. Whatever karbanos Ezra did to inaugurate the second Beit HaMikdash, which is really what the Gemara McGill is talking about, whether he needed it or it was just some type of voluntary act, Ram says it was not necessary. It was already kudish. The kedusha of Shleima is everlasting. Therefore, you could bring a carbon even though there is no Beit HaMikdash. And he quotes verbatim the Gemara. Shekdusha Rishayna Kishlai Kushlat Lavi. The Lama Niyayim Bebe Migdash Rishlai Kusha Rishayna Kushlat Lavi. Why do I say this? Vikidushasan Shar Eretz Yisrael. Le'inin Shvit L'maisis Kiyotim Like Kishlai Lavi. Rambam is saying here a very important ish thing. He's differentiating between Kedushas based on Migdash and Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam says Kedushas Eretz Yisrael was not sustained after the first exile. He holds Kedushas Eretz Yisrael, yes, was lost. It was annulled. And we're not going to get involved because we said it for years. It has to do with, is there Shvius nowadays, Deraisa, Chumas nowadays, Deraisa, all the issues. But the Rambam says distinctly, even though I hold for Eretz Yisrael, the Kedusha was annulled, but for the Beis HaMikdash I hold, it was never annulled. Why not? Lefi shekedushas hamigdash v'shleim lepnei hashchina v'shchina eina betela, because the kedusha Beis HaMikdash emanates straight from the Shechina, and the Shechina can never be voided. So, in a nutshell, he holds Temple Mount has always been holy since Shlomo Melech, even through all the exiles. Eretz Yisrael, is that kudish? That's a whole different ballgame. I can't get involved in that now. He talks about that in length in the rest of the Halacha, what's within Eretz Yisrael in our days, after the first exile, after the second exile. But for what we need to know is, this is what the Rambam passes. Almost everyone passes like the Rambam. The Ravid has his complaints, but most people learn that even though the Ravid has his complaints, he also passes like the Rambam. So we have succeeded to jump over hurdle number one. What's hurdle number one? How could we bring a korban in the Temple Mount? How can we do that? The answer is because the Temple Mount with the Beis HaMikdash, without a Beis HaMikdash, is still called as fully imbued with the holiness that we need. Okay, that is part one. So, Reb, no, the special Shechina, the special Shechina that has to do with Beis HaMikdash, that imbued the Kedusha in Beis HaMikdash, the Shechina everywhere, right? That special Shechina, that condensed and powerful Shechina is always there, and therefore it still could be Beis HaMikdash. Now, so Rabbi Tzvi Kalashir, you see a picture of him, a yarmulke like this. You can barely see a yarmulke. You figure this person never left the four walls of the Beis Medrash, but that's not what he was. He would travel. He created chapters in every single town. He would set up a group of people advocating Aliyah, but not just Aliyah and to go work, Aliyah to till the land. He did not stop. He did not take any rabbinical position because he was so involved in this. And we're talking about a major Talmid Chacham here. And sadly enough, he never got there to Yisrael. He himself never got there. He traveled all over Europe promoting these ideas. And he never got there to Yisrael. We'll get to that later. But he sent a letter to Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Now, Rabbi Akiva Eiger was already an older man. And Rabbi Akiva Eiger says, wait 1 minute here. Okay, let's say it is kudish. But the Gemara in Zvachim says very clearly we have to know the exact place of the Mizbeach. The place of the Mizbeach is where Adam HaRishon brought his kabbanas, where Noach brought his kabbanas, where Akedas Yitzchak happened. You just can't say, okay, anywhere on the Temple Mount, I'm going to put a Mizbeach. No, it had to be exactly in the exact place. Like the Gemara in Zvachim talks about, how did they know when Ezra came to build the second Beis HaMikdash, which by the way took 22 years, and they were already bringing karbanos before the Beis HaMikdash was being built. That's one of the proofs that you could bring a carbon even without a Beis HaMikdash. The Gemara said, how do they know where the Mizbeach was? One Gemara says a Malach appeared, and Michael Sar HaGadol was sacrificing on a sort of a type of a vision of a mizbeach. So they saw where Michal was sacrificing on the mizbeach. They knew where the mizbeach was. Another Gemara says they saw the ashes of Isaac on a certain area on the Temple Mount. They knew this is where the mizbeach was supposed to be. Okay, this is all Nevuah. Another Gemara says that the whole area of the Temple Mount smelled like Keteris, and there was one area that smelled the smell of burning karbanos, of burning emurim, burning flesh. They knew, this is where the mizbeach was. Another man number says a Navi came and told them. Whatever it is, we see it is of paramount importance. You got to get the exact place. So in 2022, how in the world are we going to know the exact place? This is what Rabbi Kiva Eger sent to his beloved Talmud. And his beloved Talmud said, it ain't a problem. Why ain't it a problem? He explains that when they came up in the second base Hamikdash to build the second base Hamikdash, what was left of the first base Hamikdash? Nothing. It was raised. Like the Pascal says, Oru Ada Yisoid Ba. There was nothing left from the first base Hamikdash. So when they wanted to build the second base Hamikdash, they had nothing to work on. But in our days, do we have something left? Of course, we have the Koisel Maravi. So we have a starting point to work with. Meaning, we all know the famous Medrash in Eicha that when they came to destroy the second base Hamikdash, Titus, he sent 4 ministers to destroy each wall of the base Hamikdash. One minister's name was Fangar. Fangar was actually an Arab, not a Muslim obviously, but he was an Arab. And the other 3 ministers destroyed the 4 sides of the base Hamikdash. Fangar didn't do it. And the Medrash says, why didn't he do it? It was heavenly ordained that God wants the Koisel Maravi to last forever. But when they interviewed Fangar, Tita said, why didn't you destroy it? He said, well, I figured that it would be a good idea that people should see one wall, because if they see one wall, they'll see how magnificent the base of the Mikdash was, and they'll see how teachers had such power to destroy the other 3 walls. That was maybe consciously what Fangar said, but subconsciously the Medrash says in Eicha. The Medrash says in Eicha that God made sure that the Koisel Maravi would never be destroyed. Like the Pasuk says, Doimer doidi lasvi hinezeh oimer ach koisleinu. Rashi in Tehillim says something amazing. When I saw this, I got chills. One pasuk, when it talks about the base was destroyed, it says Oru Ada Yisoid Ba. Total destruction. Another pasuk in Tehillim, Pei Daled, says Gam Sipor Matzah Bayis Ujor Kain Law Asher Shota Efroichel Es Mibechecha Hashem. That even the birds have nested in your area of destruction. And Rashi says, what's the first thing when you go to the Koisel? What is one of the things that hit you the most? The birds. There's birds all over the Koisel. They're flying all over the place over there. So the pasuk is Meramiz to the Koisel. In the first base, it just says, there were no birds there because they had nowhere to nest. The second base says, Gam Sipor Matzah Bayis Ujor Kain La. And Rashi says there in Tehillim that in the second base of Mikdash, even though it was destroyed, there was still a place for the birds to nestle. Where is that place? The Koisel. Any Israeli knows. The birds are all over the Koisel. I found that to be quite interesting. The bottom line is, said the Halakha Reb Tzvi Kalisher. First of all, there's something called triangulation. We have the Koisel Maravi. Second, we have the Evan Shesiah. We know exactly where the Oren was. Third, and this is most important, in the second base Hamikdash, did they have a Mishnayos Midos? Did they have a Rambam? No. So when they came to the second base Hamikdash, they had to build it. They had no Kaisel Maravi. They had no Rambam. They had no Mishnayos Midas. So they couldn't figure it out. They needed a Navi. But us, we could figure it out where the Mizbeach should be. We have enough landmarks to figure out where the Mizbeach should be. We know where the Evan is. We know where the Kaisel Maravi is. We have Midas. We have Masechta Midas. We have the Rambam. Another thing we have, the Gemara says that all of the Temple Mount was built on arches, except for the Mizbeach. Why was all Temple Mount built on arches? Just in case there was a tummy mace, there was tumah, an arch would make sure the tumah wouldn't hit, depending on the way it's built, tumah would be stopped by an arch. But the Mizbeach, there was no arch, because it says Mizbeach Adama Tasali. So we could just dig. Now, you have to understand, he never went to Eretz Yisrael. You know, the way I'm seeing it now, we know in our days, the level is so much higher than it was 2,000 years ago. So some of this may be a little bit more difficult, the way we see it. But bottom line is, he wrote to Rabbi Akiva Eiger, because we have the Kaisel, because we have Mishnayos, because we have the Evan Shasiya, because we have the Kfifin, he had some other ways to figure it out. We could figure it out. And the second base means they couldn't figure it out. We can figure it out. The truth is, Maritz Chiyitz figured it out. Yobre Maritz Chiyitz, he figured it out. He wrote exactly where it's supposed to be. So, no problem. So we got through the second hurdle. The second hurdle, we can build the Mizbeach, no problem.
Where's the Evan Shasiya?
In the dome. It's there. Everyone knows it's there. That what?
Who said it's the right one?
Evan Shasiya. It seems that there's a Messiah that it is what it is. That it is it. So what? Oh, so Harava going Avi Fine asks question number 3. Question number 3. So we figured out one is we can build no problem. No problem with no base to make this. No problem. It's kudish. Problem 2, we don't know where the Mizbeach is. We'll figure it out. No problem. Wait a minute. It's Tameh. We're Tameh. We are very Tameh. We're Tameh Mace. Oh, that's an easy one. That is an easy one. We know that Kabbanah Sibor, Tuma, Tchuya, or Hutra, B'tzibor. We know we are different types of Kabbanahs. There's something called a carbon Yachid, and there's something called a carbon Sibor. A carbon Sibor would be Musaf, Rosh Chodesh, Tamid. Carbon Pesach is called a carbon Sibor. There's something called the carbon Yachid. What's the carbon Yachid? I want to give a present to God, a shlamim, or a sin offering, my own personal sin offering. That's carbon Yachid. Carbon Sibor, Tuma, Hutra, B'tzibor. No problem. No problem. Next hurdle. Okay, great. We're all tummy mace. No problem. We're all going to go up there. No problem. But we got to get up there beforehand. We can need probably a couple days, probably. Scout out the area. It shouldn't take too long to build a Mizbeach, by the way. It's not like there's major production. It's really not. But at least a couple of days. How are we going to get up there beforehand in order to be able to build the Mizbeach? So you wouldn't believe it. There's a Gemara in Eruvin about this. There's a Gemara in Eruvin, and the Rambam says it quite explicitly. The Rambam says the law is, in order to fix the Mizbeach or the Beis HaMikdash, anyone can go up. If you had a craftsman that's Tameh, he's allowed to go up. B'shah shenichzed habnayim live nice, etc. Ein sham kahanim yichnesu leviyim, loy matzah leviyim yichnesu Yisraelim, mitzvah time, loy matzah time yichnesu tameim. If you needed a tameh to fix the Beis HaMikdash because he had the expertise that no one else had, based on a pasuk, a tameh could go into the kudish kodashim. So we're good to go. We're allowed to go up there. We're all tameh, but we're allowed to go up, scout out the area, and figure it out, build the Mizbeach, and bring our carbon. No problem. Wait. Then Rabbi Akiva Eiger sends him another letter. Rabbi Akiva Eiger says, wait, we got a problem here. And Rabbi Sri Kalish is like, okay, he's sharpening his knife, getting ready for the korban. No, you got a problem. You got another hurdle. We don't know who Kahanim are. We have no idea who Kahanim are. We don't have enough of Mesorah. You need to be a Kohen to bring a korban Pesach. So how in the world are you get rid of that problem? Now, Rabbi Kiva Eger says, it's an amazing pilpul back and forth between him and Rabbi Kiva Eger. Of course, we're choishish. Of course, we give the first aliyah to the kohen. But bottom line is, we don't know 100% who is a kohen. So, and if you're not a kohen and you bring a korban, you're chayiv misa b'nei shemayim. The zar that's makav is chayiv misa. So Rabbi Kiva Eger says, how are you going to get out of that one? So here, Rabbi Kalisher says, he says that, no, not a problem. Not a problem. And he quotes a Mishnah in Idias. Amr Bishua Makaba Nin Rabbi Yochanan Zakai. Shishama mi Rabbi v'Rabbi mi Rabbi. Halacha Moshe mi Sinai. Wow. Halacha Moshe Sinai. Shein Elio ba letame letaher lerachek ulekorev. Elio is not going to come and start saying, oh, you're this and you're that. He's not coming for that. Ella, lerachek coming to do it. Only if someone became a kohen by paying off lots of money to the rabbi, then Elio will spot him out. But anyone else, Elio is going to leave alone. Someone thinks he's a kohen. You think you're a kohen, you're a kohen.
What if someone's great-grandfather?
It makes no difference. Only if originally the way it happened is that someone's great-grandfather paid a rabbi a lot of money to be a kohen. And then Rabbi Yehuda says, no, not true. Elio is only going to come to say one thing only. Someone who didn't know he's a kohen to make him a kohen. But even if someone's great-great-grandfather is called Bali Zroya, he had a lot of political clout, and he got himself to be a kohen when he wasn't supposed to be, doesn't make a difference. Only the car. In a nutshell, I consider says the Sikalisher. What is the point of this Mishnah? What is this Mishnah telling us here? Halacha Moshe. Here are the Jews are sitting around the Har Sinai, and the Halacha Moshe Sinai. When Elio comes, we'll figure out what he'll do. What do I care? Why in the world is the Mishnah is telling us what will happen when Elio comes? Hilchasel Mashicha, like the Gemara asked many times. Who cares? When Elio comes, he'll do what he does, what he wants to do. And I don't understand. What does it mean when Elio comes? He's only going to pick a couple of people. We're going to have to know who Kahanim are. What do you mean? Elio's going to have to come and say he's a kohen, he's not. Says Rav Kalashir, that's exactly what the point of this Halacha Moshe Sinai. You know why Moshe said this Halacha Moshe Sinai? To tell you that you don't have to wait until Elio comes. You don't have to worry that maybe when Elio comes, he's going to say, this was a kohen, this wasn't a kohen, he was a kohen. You don't got to worry about that. Anyone who based on Roiv and Chazakah in 2022, if we think someone is a kohen, that's the way it's going to be. So the Halacha Moshe Sinai, we don't care what's going to happen when Elio comes. What it's telling us is, it's a revelation that don't think anything's going to change when Elio comes. Nothing's going to change. If you think you're a kohen in 2022, don't think we're going to find out later on you aren't a kohen. We rely on Roiv and Chazakah and Muchzik, and someone who thinks he's a kohen is a kohen.
Elio can say that his grandfather paid off to become a kohen.
No. So he. Okay, so first of all, it's 1 in a million, and second of all, we're not going to be chayes that one. And first of all, if you see the whole Mishnah here, I don't have time. The Rabbi Yehuda argues on that. Rabbi Yehuda argues that. It says that Elio is only going to come and pick. Yeah. So basically, now this is a huge sugya. This is a huge sugya. He brings many riots. That anyone who thinks is a kohen in our days is a kohen. We find all over. Especially we find that in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, it says that Ezra, anyone who learned Kedushin, knows the pasuk says, Elu bikshu ksav hamisyachzam loy nimsu v'yaga'alu min kahuna. We find in Ezra's time they were saying this one is a kohen, this was not a kohen. Where's your yichus? It's open pasuk, and it says there are many families that were ousted from the kahuna. So the answer is very simple. In those days where everyone had some type of report that said who their lineage was, there was some type of ksav yichus is called. So those who didn't have it, it's clearly not kohanim, or clearly there's a problem. So there, according to Torah law, you don't rely on Rabbi Chazaka. Everyone else has their report. Everyone else has a lineage. Where's yours? Oh, so there's a reyusa. There's something that is condemning. More than that, anyone who reads Navi knows that what happened in the second before for the Jews that were in Eretz Yisrael, they all married. A lot of them intermarried. We know that a lot of them intermarried. That's what the Navi's talking about there in Ezra and Nehemiah. How they all broke down crying because they were intermarried. So yes, in the time of the second Beit Mikdash, at least in the beginning of the second Beit Mikdash, if you couldn't prove you were a kohen, you were ousted. Because they knew that there was a serious problem, and there were ways to figure out if you were a kosher kohen or not. Because everyone had their ksav yuchsim. But in 2022, where there are no ksav yuchsim, we rely on roiv and chazak. We rely on status quo. Hence, no problem, and he uses this Mishnah idiot to buttress his position. Sure enough, it seems that Rabbi Yeager acquiesced. At the end of the day, it seems he agreed to him that someone who thinks he's a kohen, he could say he's a kohen, 100% in our days. But then Rabbi Yeager writes another letter. Wait one cotton pick a second. We still got problems here. You got a kohen, he needs to have big day kahuna. So you'll say, where are you going to get the 12 breaststones? Who even knows what they are? Oh, you didn't pin them. Where are you going to get that? So you'll say, no big deal. Who needs a kohen goggle? You need a kohen goggle? You need a kohen goggle for Yom Kippur. You don't need a kohen goggle for every day of the week. No problem. Wait, here's our problem. One of the garbs that the kohen, a regular kohen wore was an avnate. What was the material of the avnate? Oh, as a avnate sheish mosher tcheles v'argamon. Says Rabbi Yeager, my beloved Talmud. Where are you going to get tcheles? Now, obviously, Rabbi Yeager wasn't alive in 2022 because you got half the world, got all the breasts over there, everyone's walking around with their tcheles, But I guess in those days they didn't think there was tcheles. So you're up at the creek. You can't. You got all these hurdles. You got the mucker. Okay, it's kudish. It's like a kudish. Okay, you found the place of his bear. Tumah's not a problem. You got the kohanim. You're missing the belt. Just the belt. The belt. No. Rabbi Sri Kalisher goes to town. He goes to town. He says, you're wrong. He says, it's not true. He says, only the kohen gadol needs an avnate, which is a big machlokes. A big machlokes. I can't get involved. Because different psukim say different things. He says, 2, and let's say you don't have tcheles. Let's say you do need tcheles. Have you noticed we wear tzitzis, we don't have tcheles? So we see that you could, just like tzitzis, tcheles is not makiv, by the avnate also tcheles is not makiv. It's not a must. It's not a must. Third, he goes to the Rambam. The Rambam, tellingly, when he talks about tcheles and tzitzis, he talks about the chilazim, right? That mysterious snail. But when the Rambam talks about tcheles and big day kuna, he never mentions chilazim. So the Merkavas HaMishnah says that in the big day kuna, it just had to be blue. It doesn't make a difference the chilazim blue like we find by tzitzis. So we're good to go. We're good to go. We got the avnate. Either you don't need tcheles at all, or if you do need it, it's not ma'akiv, it's not obligatory, or you don't need the chilazim. Rabbi Yeager was quite an old man by then. He said, your arguments are very convincing. Let me write to my son-in-law, the Chassam Sofer, and see what he has to say about this. Now, I don't know how Rabbi Yeager got a son-in-law, Chassam Sofer. He must have paid big bucks for that. At least 2 diras in Yerushalayim for the son-in-law Chassam Sofer. Right? So Rabbi Yeager's famed son-in-law was a Chassam Sofer. And I think it was the second marriage, if I'm not mistaken. Second marriage after Chassam Sofer's first wife died, if I'm not mistaken. And says Reb Kalashir, I was waiting for an answer. And finally the answer came. And Reb Kiva Eger wrote to Chassam Sofer, do you think we could bring a carbon pesach nowadays? What do you think he answered?
Yes.
He said yes. He said yes. He said there's a political problem. In those years, the dome that we see now was just built. They just built a mosque over there. So the Chassam Sofer said it's not going to happen because the Arabs are never going to allow it. But he goes through the whole thing. No problem. Kohen, no problem. He said we could rely on Kohen. We could rely on the Kohen, on the Rav Chazaka. And then anyone who learned Makis, by Kohen, the law is, even if you, Baruch Hashem Cheloi, that even if later on we find out you're a Chalol, you remember that, guys? You learn Makis? That by Kohen, even if at the end we find out you're not a Kohen, it still works. That's the Gemara in Makis. I'm sure you all remember. So the Chassam Sofer said, no problem. It's kudish. We can find the mizbeach. No problem about the big day kahuna. He said there's only one problem. What's the problem? Shkolim. Where are you going to get the shkolim from? We need shkolim. Right? That everyone knows we had Pasha Shkolim not too long ago, right? Why do we have Pasha Shkolim? Because every Jew is supposed to give shkolim. How are you going to get every Jew to give shkolim? So hence, says the Chassam Sofer, it's a good idea, but only a korban Pesach. Because korban Pesach, even though it's a korban sibor, but everyone buys their own korban Pesach. But the regular kabbanas, a tamid, musif, that's not going to work out. Because you need to have a shkolim. And the Chassam Sofer says, by the way, the Chassam Sofer says, this is not a new idea. The Captain of Ferax brought down that Rabbi Chilmi Paris in the year 5017 tried to do this, tried to build a mizbeach and bring a korban Pesach. The Medrash brings down that Rabbi Shua bar Chananya tried to build the Beis HaMikdash on his own. There are many I can't go through all this history. There are many historical proofs that even after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, they brought a korban Pesach. There's a Gemara in Pesachim that Rabbi Gamaliel told Tevi, his servant, what's the proper way of roasting a korban Pesach, and he told him to do it. Rabbi Gamaliel lived after the second Beis was destroyed. So there are many proofs that even though there's no Beis HaMikdash, so there's no difference if it was a day, 2 days after the second Beis was destroyed, or 2,000 years after the Beis was destroyed. There's no halachic difference. You could do it then, you could do it now. Okay? Now, Rav Kalashir, when I saw this myself, I'm like, shkolim? That's your problem? No. So you get some gvir to give all the money to buy the korban. I was like shocked when the Chassam Sofer is not the only one who said it. Also the Yeshivat Malkai, the famous Rabbi Shua Kutna, they all say the same thing about the shkolim was a big problem. They say korban Pesach, we'll let it go. And I'm like, big deal about the shkolim. So someone will give the money. Someone donate the money. And that's exactly what Sri Kalashir says. Big deal, so you won't get the shkolim from everyone. You'll get a bunch of gvirim to give the money. Is that such a big deal? Yes. You need the shekel to come from each and every one. Sri Kalashir says, what happened to the second Beis HaMikdash? How many people went up in the second Beis HaMikdash? 42,000. Everyone else stayed in Bavel. They didn't want to come, they were living the good life. So only 42,000. Where did they get the money from? Clearly, they gave their own money. They donated it to the congregation. They voted to the community, and they didn't get shkolim from everyone. What is the big deal? And that is exactly what Sri Kalashir says. He doesn't know what these rabbis are talking about. And the truth is, it's an open Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. It's an open Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara says like this. He says it's a mitzvah to bring shkolim, and you should bring the new kabbanas of the new year, meaning every Nisan they would bring a new set of kabbanas. You should bring it from the new shkolim. But im hevim in a yoshin yotza el shechitza mitzvah. If you're using old shkolim, it's okay, but you're chitza for the mitzvah. It's a certain type of diminution from the mitzvah. V'yochid she'esnadev misheloi ksherim bevad she'yimsrein l'tzibur. A yachid that wants to give the karbanai sibur, it's no problem, as long as he doesn't think that it's his own private carbon. The Gemara says, Pshita. Ma'od tema chashina lo yimsem l'siba yafa yafe. No, I would think maybe the yachid, he's like, I'm going to bring the carbon tubid. You're a yachid. No, I'll give it to the congregation. But we're afraid that he's really thinking in his mind that he's bringing the carbon tzibur. Kamash Malon, that no, it's no problem. It's an open Gemara. It's an open Gemara that a yachid could give a carbon of the tzibur. Now, it's not that simple. It's not simple. For whatever reason, it's not so simple. Other Gemaras. But in principle, l'chayra, this should not be a problem. So it comes out, at this point in our lives, we should all get ourselves in shape. So it's not easy to check the carbon. And there's no problem. We've gotten through all the hurdles. Right? And then he said, okay, he sent out a message to all rabbis. Go ahead. I challenge you to find me any problems. And they took up the challenge. One rabbi wrote, where's the tzitz? What does that mean, where's the tzitz? Anyone who knows, the Kohen Gadol wore tzitz, a special forehead type of plate. And the Gemara says many times, anyone who learned Rashi and Chumash knows that the power of the tzitz, what was the power of the tzitz? Tzitz meratzah. What does tzitz meratzah mean? That if you brought a carbon betuma, it will be kosher because it sits. So it's like a magic amulet somehow or other. It would make the carbon kosher. So even if you want to say tuma tchuya b'tzibur, that's only if it's budret, only if it's helped with the tzitz. And we don't have the tzitz. That was the question that some rabbis sent him. He goes through the sugi, I can't go through it. He says it's not true. He said it is true. The tzitz helps, but you don't need it. Okay. Rabbi Kiva Eger writes back. There's another problem. Anyone who's going to come at night, Seder night, you got, okay, we need to slice some matzah. So your very Haredi brother-in-law puts out like 14 matzahs and tries to stuff it in his mouth in 2.5 seconds, and everyone else is just so grossed out. But right? Because and this guy, no, you don't need that much matzah. No, you don't need that much matzah. No big deal. And this one's there, right? And also the same thing with Servius Yain. So normal people, they come, make kiddush, a little cup. This guy comes with a goblet. Whoa, what's going on over here? Oh, well, the shear is 75 ounces, 600 gallons. No one knows the shiurim nowadays, right? No one knows the shiurim nowadays. So it says Rabbi Kiva Eger, even if you know the place of the mizbeach, but the mizbeach is supposed to be 32 amos by 32 amos, the second mizbeach. How are you going to know what 32 amos is? Is it like this? Is it Amma? The Gemara talks about it. The Gemara says we don't know. Was it Amma 4 fingers like this, 4 fingers like this? So you're still back to the Mizbeach problem. You can't figure it out. If Sri Kalashir says, it's not true. Because the Rambam brings down, even though you have to know the exact place of the Mizbeach, but you can make a smaller Mizbeach if you want. It's an open Rambam. It's an open Rambam that you can make a smaller Mizbeach. It's open Gemara and Zvachim. So make it, he says, make it 32 by 32 like this. So either that is exact, either it's exact, and then you got a Mehuder Mizbeach, or if it's a little smaller, so it's a little smaller. There's no big deal. The 4 corners, the horns, and the square shape of Mizbeach are makviv. And any Mizbeach that does not have the horns, and the base, and the ramp, and the square shape, no good. Avo midas orkoi, midas rachboi, midas kaimasai ein makvin. The exact size doesn't matter. So he said to Rabbi Kiva Eger, what's the big deal? Just make sure do the smallest size possible. Either it's exactly right, or it's a little smaller. So Rabbi Kiva Eger sort of like gave up. Actually, what happened was, I'm afraid he died. What happened was he died, and he was very old, he was a very old man by the time that this was happening. That's what I can't figure out. I can't figure out if Rabbi Kiva Eger knew this Rambam. I know when these letters were happening, he was a very, very old man, and he was very sick. So that's why I can't. It's hard for me to believe that Rabbi Kiva Eger didn't know the Rambam. Then someone talks about, wait a minute, we got another problem. What's the other problem? Chavitin. In order to become a kohen, you have to be inaugurated. You got to bring a minchas chavitin to be inaugurated to be a kohen. Now, a minchas chavitin is a private korban. You can't bring that betuma. So how are you going to be able to inaugurate the kohen? Right? No problem. He brings a proof that you don't need. It's not makkah. It's not makkah. Bottom line is, the Tzvi Kalisher says, I got all this historical proof that they tried to build a mizbeach. I got Rabbi Chil Pariz. I got the Kesef Mishnah also says. The Kesef Mishnah also says that there's a possibility that we can bring a korban in our days. There was one main opponent. It's getting very late. This will take me another 2-3 hours. There was one main opponent. Who was that? The Oirich Lener, the Binyan Sion. Now, when I say he was an opponent, he agreed with everything. He agreed that we should move to Eretz Yisrael, and they should till the land, and there should be a community here, and he agreed that the gula will happen slowly. He was just not into bringing the korban. He wasn't into bringing a korban. Why wasn't he into bringing a korban? He basically said, based on a pasuk in Vayikra. The pasuk says, "V'hashimoyses midashchem v'loy ariach b'reach nechaychechem." I will destroy your Beis Hamikdash, and I will not show favor to your kabbanas. I will not ariach b'reach nechaychechem. So the Binyan Sion says, this pasuk doesn't make too much sense. Of course, if there's no Beis Hamikdash, there won't be any korban. I don't got to say, and when there's no Beis Hamikdash, I won't inhale, I won't smell or take in your kabbanas. So the Binyan Sion said, this is what the pasuk is talking. You know what the pasuk is talking about? Exactly what Tzvi Kalisher wants to do. Ashmois is Mikdashchem. There's no Beis Hamikdash. No Beis Hamikdash. But you still want to try to bring a korban, which maybe halachically will work out. Halachically, you can build a mizbeach and there's a kohen. Everything works out. But still the pasuk says, Loi ariach berech nichaychechem. I will not find favor in your korban. So says the Binyan Sion that the pasuk is talking exactly about this case. Don't do this. You halachically can do it. Don't do it. Meaning, if you open up a Mishnah in Zvachim, the Mishnah in Zvachim says that there are 6 things you got to. There are 6 things that you have to have in mind when you shech the korban. What's the 6 things? L'shem shisha dvarim hazevach nizbach. L'shem zevach, what the korban is for. L'shem zeveach. L'shem Hashem, for God. L'shem reach. L'shem nichoyach. A korban has to be done. L'shem reich. L'shem nichoyach. The Gemara explains what that means exactly. But basically means that God should like your korban, should find favor in the korban. And the pasuk is saying over here, this is what the Binyan Sion says it's not right to bring korban nowadays. Now, Rabbi Tzvi Kalisher saw this, he went ballistic. He said, you're taking a pasuk and you're deciding to make a drasha on your own to say that the pasuk means the Beit Hamikdash is destroyed, as Mikdash Shachem, but now you could bring technically a korban, but don't do it. He was just flabbergasted how the Binyan Sion who decided to make this drasha on his own. He basically says, first of all, I just brought you a lot of proof that there are very big people who tried to bring kabbanas, even though the Beit Hamikdash was destroyed. He said Rechimi Pariz, the Captain of Ferax. He said, second of all, I don't understand. You're taking this random pasuk in Teicha. You know it says in Teicha that mothers will eat their sons, mothers will eat their children. Does that happen every day? It doesn't happen every single day. Hopefully not. Clearly, not every pasuk in the Teicha applies every single day. So all that pasuk means, when the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, yes, when the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, then God didn't want the kabbanas at that time because he was upset. But who says that applies 1,000 years later? He says, you know what? It says many times in the Navi, Kitirbu tefillah eineni shemeya. It's a pasuk. God says, I don't want to hear tefillas. Do we daven today? Of course we daven today. We don't say, oh, ketir with tefillah, ain't shmeir, so don't daven anymore. Right? The pasuk says, Chaycheichem u'mayadechem sana nafshi. I hate your festivals. So we don't do Yom Tov anymore? No, clearly that pasuk is saying, at that point in time, God was not very happy with the Jewish situation. He wasn't happy with the Yom Tovim that they were doing. So here too, this pasuk, how can you say this pasuk is like a directive, never bring a korban anymore? Because it says, Hashmoisi es mikdashechem v'lo yareich nichaychem. I'm not being fair, the Binyan Sian connects it to a Gemara. But this is basically, there are three college who was very upset about this. Just taking this random pasuk. He brings a medrash. There was once a guy who said to Akiva, why are you keeping Shabbos? Why are you keeping Yom Tov? The pasuk says, Chadshechem v'mayadechem sana nafshi. God hates your Yom Tovim. Why are you keeping it? Rabbi Akiva said back, you're not understanding. The pasuk says, Chadshechem u'mayadechem. Your Yom Tovim I don't like. Because you, if you know the story in the Navi, Yeravim made up his own Yom Tovim. Yeravim made his own Yom Tovim. But basically, the Medrash is saying, the way you're doing it, I don't like. If you want to do it my way, I'd like it. What does the pasuk says? Hashimoy says midashechem v'lo yariach nichaychachem. The way you're bringing the korban, I don't like it because they were doing shituf, they were doing avodah zarah. He brings down. It never says the word nichaychachem in anywhere in the Navi. It always says nichaychai, reich nichayach, reich nichaychai. So the dig that pasuk means Hashimoy says midashechem v'lo yariach nichaychachem, while you're still having their ulterior motives and mixing it with all different type of idolatrous type of services. So basically, he came out. We should go, and this is the end of the book. Basically, he says that everyone agreed with him, more or less, except for the Binyan Sian. He has a scummers from many gedolim. Again, a lot of gedolim were for Yeshivat Ohr and moving there and building up the community agriculturally. About bringing the kabbanas, most of them agreed with him at the end of the day. He was very forceful. Sadly enough, he never got to Eretz Yisrael. He tried many times, but he had 9 daughters. And it's not easy to marry off 9 daughters. He traveled around Europe promoting his ideas, promoting it, and he tried to get support. He died in what was Prussia then. Anyone who goes to a supermarket in our days and goes to the hot dog section, you will find products from Tirat Tzvi. Tirat Tzvi is a moshav up north. And who's Tzvi? Rav Tzvi Kalashir. The Tirat Tzvi is named after Rav Tzvi Kalashir. They named the kibbutz after him. It was one of the first frum kibbutz. Right next to Tirat Tzvi, you'll find Stei Elio. Stei Elio. Who's Stei Elio? The Rav Tzvi Kalashir had a good friend, Rabbi Elio Gudmacher. They worked together in promoting these ideas. Stei Elio is right next to Tirat Tzvi. One is for him, and one is for him. In 1988, they brought to Tirat Tzvi the Safed Torah that Rabbi Tzvi Kalashir used. What happened was, in Kristallnacht, one of his grandchildren ran away to Scotland. He was smart enough to get out the next day. And they smuggled the Safed Torah out to Scotland. And in 1988, a great-great-grandchild, or great-great-great-grandchild, an older woman, decided to donate that Safed Torah that was saved from the Nazis, and took his Safed Torah, and it was put into the Aron in Tirat Tzvi. That lady who did it died the next day. She was a very, very old lady. Rabbi Isai, I really told you literally 10% of what I had to say here today. I'm not exaggerating. It's a beautiful book, beautiful midrashim, beautiful zoyars and riots. But he wrote a letter to Rothschild, Ansel Rothschild. Listen to this letter. In this letter, he says, you know, when the Rambam talks about Mashiach, the Rambam says specifically, Mashiach doesn't have to be some miracle worker. Mashiach just has to be someone who engages the Jewish people and gets them to be religious, basically. That's Mashiach. And he alludes quite explicitly that you, Anshe Rothschild, can be the Mashiach. He said, you please go. At that point in time, Eretz Yisrael was not in Ottoman's rule. Some random guy from Egypt had Eretz Yisrael. Muhammad Ali, they're all Muhammad Ali, right? Muhammad Ali, the Pasha. He wrote in the letter, do me a favor, go call up Muhammad Ali and say, Muhammad, I'm going to buy you a bigger country. Rothschild obviously was so rich that this Rav Kalsher said to Rothschild, call up this Muhammad Ali and tell him, I'll buy you a bigger country, you give me Israel. And he says, if you do this, he didn't say it openly, he's making allusions that you could become the Mashiach. He also says the kudish was also called Mashiach. And I'm like, and he said, I'm telling you, forget about being Mashiach, it's a good business deal. It's a good business deal. I'm telling you the price of the land is going to go up. Imagine if he would have, imagine that. He's telling you to buy the whole Israel, stack the whole thing. And they said, if this guy Muhammad Ali doesn't want to do it, at least buy just Yerushalayim, at least buy something. We don't know what Rothschild did or didn't. We know he didn't buy it. That much we know. It didn't happen. But if he would have bought it, I don't know how rich he was then, but in 2022, if someone who owned all of Yerushalayim, and just a closet in Yerushalayim cost $1 million, right? He would have been a fairly rich fellow. I'll just end off, like I said. Why didn't he buy it? I don't know why he didn't buy it. He didn't have, I don't know. The same thing like I say, why 25 years ago didn't I buy a bunch of apartments? I've also been a rich man. Like I said, I printed up here a lot of Zoyars, and that was going to be the second part of this year, but there's no time. We'll end off with some medrash. One medrash. It says when Mashiach is going to come, there's going to be an ingathering of many people, and great riches will be given to all these people. But then the new ingathering, the new people who came from exile say, hey, there's a group of people that I see are like flying. They're a group of people who don't look like human beings anymore. They're like flying, and they're in Gan Eden Tachtoin. The new congregation, meaning the people who came when Mashiach came. And they'll say, Melech Mashiach. Why does that group of Bnei Yisrael look like Malachim? And they don't even have like a body. They're sort of like flying, and they're learning with God in Gan Eden Tachtoin. And Mashiach is going to say, Mida Keneged Mida. Those guys were from the first ingathering, the first group of people who came to Eretz Yisrael before Mashiach. And they left the riches, and they traveled, and they endured terrorist attacks, and they were willing to endure great travails, and they didn't care about their money. So Mida Keneged Mida. They now, in Mashiach's time, they turn into like these half angels. You guys, the second group of people who only came afterwards, you stayed in Chutz La'aretz. Why did you guys stay in Chutz La'aretz? Because you had big houses and you didn't want to leave. Okay, so we'll give you money now. Atem shitim yichoylem lavoi le'eretz so kamoisem v'nisrashaltem lavoi ba'avorchem das mamon. You stayed in Chutz La'aretz. And because you cared about the money, so we'll give you money. Now you'll give you more money. We'll give you more money. We'll give you more money. Mashiach gives them, like it says here, all the treasures that were in the sea was spat out, that was on Jaffa, and was given to them. But those first people, i.e. me, us, who came even before Mashiach and was willing to suffer different trials and tribulations, their schar is a whole different ballgame. They're flying up there in Shemayim, in Gan Eden Tachta, and learning with the Rabbi. Okay, Rabbi Isai. I think I've kept you here long enough. I just want to end up with one more thing. One more thing. I feel bad. It sounds like we sort of knocked the binyan Sion. I've been reading this book for a whole week. So I'm sort of on Rabbi Sri Kalisher's side. My son will tell you, I've been reading this book for the whole week. So I'm sort of on his side. But surprising enough, and we'll end with this. We say in the Haggadah, the bracha right before we drink a second cup of wine, we beg God that we should be zeicha to bring zvachim upsachim. What do we say? Please, God, bring us the Beit Mikdash. V'nechel sham min hazvachim u'min hapsachim asher yagia damim al kir mizbechech el ratzon. Let us eat from the psachim that their blood will come on the mizbeach l'ratzon. So the question is, where's the blood? Of course. What is added? We should eat from the Pesach that his blood is brought on the kir of mizbeach l'ratzon. Of course. What do they do Pesach? You put blood on this bear, right? It seems redundant. What is it being saying here? Says in Siv mi Volozhin. Fascinating enough, he brings down that from the Yaakov Emden, we mentioned him every single year, they did bring kabbanas after the second Mikdash was destroyed. They did bring kabbanas. But the only carbon they brought was carbon Pesach. They didn't bring any other kabbanas. Why not? Why not? Because of what the Binyan Sian said. Because it says, that they wouldn't bring any carbon. Because it says, okay. So why the carbon Pesach? So if the Binyan Sian is right, which is the Netziv says he's right, so why anything? He says very beautiful, the Netziv. He says, if you know, there are 613 mitzvahs. We don't know what they are exactly, but a lot, big machlokes. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. A lot of minor mitzvahs don't count that as a mitzvah. Why not? That seems like number one mitzvah, right? Mitzvah uno. They say, because the concept of mitzvah means that there's a commander that commands. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha is not a mitzvah, that's establishing that there's a commander. Once there's a commander, we can start talking about the commandments. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha is establishing that there's what to talk about, right? So that's not a mitzvah. That's just establishing the rules that there is a commander and you're a commandee. So they say Anoichi Hashem Elokecha is not a mitzvah. You hear? Same thing. All the kabbanas are latzos reach nichoyach. All kabbanas are to find favor in God's eyes. Carbon Pesach is not to do the ratzon of God, to appease him per se, or to satisfy him, kaviyachon, in some say. Carbon Pesach is to establish that there is a God. That's what Carbon Pesach is. Carbon Pesach is mishchu chu, get rid of the avodah zarah, take Carbon Pesach. So it's not possible to say by Carbon Pesach it's a reich nichoyach. Reich nichoyach implies that to appease someone, to do a favor to someone, we got to first establish that there is a someone. So just like Anoichi Hashem Elokecha is not part of the mitzvahs, Carbon Pesach doesn't have the rules of the Reich Nichoyach. Oh, if so, now we understand the nusach. The nusach. What do we say? V'neichel sham min hazvachim ha'pesachim asher yagia damim al kir mizbacha l'ratzoin. What is the Baal Gad saying? The Baal Gad is saying, I know what Rabbi Kalisher says. I know that there's a possibility of bringing a Carbon Pesach without a Beit HaMikdash. Without a Beit HaMikdash. And the truth is, that won't be l'ratzon, because it's just a Mizbeach without God's Beit HaMikdash, without the Beit HaMikdash of the times of Mashiach. But we're praying, we don't want the Mizbeach or the Kalisher. We don't want that. We don't want this this makeshift mizbeach. We want the real thing. That is being intimated in the words. We want the real McCoy. We want the real mizbeach that does have reich nichoyach. This is the pshat from the famous the Netziv. Part of it's some of it is from his Talmud of the Brisker Rav. Rabbi, like I said, I have a lot more to say here, but I've really overdone my time by like a half an hour. So we'll stop here. I hope this has been informative.